Good morning, members and staff. Today is October 10th. We continue our hearings. Today we will have providing testimony to the committee Mr. Wallon from CUC, and today he will be providing testimony to this committee relative to Article 9, the sole source contract for Saipan Development LLC. Sarge, would you kindly escort our witness in, please? Good morning, Mr. Fong. Mr. Fong, if you're going to speak, there's a button on the mic. If you press it and the light on the microphone turns on, that means the mic is on. When you're finished talking, you can just push it again. When the light turns off, the mic is off.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning. Good morning also to the House members.
Mr. Fong, we will jump right into it. We have other witnesses scheduled for today as well, so I'm going to put you under oath first, so would you kindly raise your right hand, please? Sir, do you swear or affirm under penalty of law that the testimony that you're about to give is the truth?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. You can put your hand down. Sir, would you kindly state your full name, your title, and the agency you represent?
My name is Wallon Fong. I'm the Power Deputy Director for Power at CUC.
Thank you. You can turn your mic off for now. First, let me say thank you for appearing before this body. We were a little concerned that we may not have the ability to meet with you physically or personally, and we had originally tried to schedule a teleconference to be able to talk to you. But thank you for being here today. We understand you are a busy man. There's a lot of problems with CUC. I heard on Rota, and you're scheduled to return this afternoon. Is that correct? Can you push that?
It's not confirmed yet, but I'll be traveling back to Rota sometimes this week.
Oh, great, great. Maybe I can start by asking you, Mr. Fong, what is your role at CUC as the Deputy Director for Power?
I'm in charge of all power generation and power distribution in the CNMI. Although I'm a Deputy Director, I'm also the engineer for the Power Division.
Thank you. Mr. Fong, I'm sorry, before we proceed any further, would Mr. Fong's legal counsel please introduce herself to the committee? Name, title, and...
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. My name is Deborah Fisher. I'm from the Law Office of Deborah E. Fisher, and I'm CUC's outside counsel for this matter, representing Mr. Fong.
Thank you, Deb. Mr. Fong, maybe we can start by maybe you telling us about your involvement with the power purchase agreement for Saipan Development LLC from the time you learned of it to, I guess, what was your role in the review? Maybe start with those two.
Okay, my role in the power purchase agreement was not, I would say, wasn't much, because in July and August I was on vacation in Fiji in those 2 months. However, my role was communication with, I had discussions and communications with Alan Fletcher on a number of topics, and also economics.com, CUC's consultant.
Thank you. Yeah, we did see some of the email correspondence between yourself and Alan Fletcher and Mr. Young from economist.com. First, can I ask you, did you review the power purchase agreement and the other related agreements?
While I was on vacation, I received a draft copy of the PPA. Because it didn't have any numbers, numbers like the cost per kilowatt, I only skimmed through it, but I didn't respond while I was in Fiji regarding the draft PPA. However, before I left, there was economist.com, Robert Young sent me an email. He wanted to discuss the sizing of diesel engines, and he recommended something like 18 megawatts, but I had some concerns about the sizing of the engines for the proposed plant, and fuel efficiency. We discussed fuel efficiency to a little bit more detail. But while on vacation, I didn't make any, I don't recall making any comments regarding the PPA. It was only when I got back in September or early September, I made some comments, verbal. That's it.
You know that the contract was signed on August 3rd, so you were on vacation for that period of time. Is that correct?
That is correct.
You did kind of participate in the discussions. We have with us the emails and correspondence between yourself, economist.com, and I do recall one of the emails where Mr. Young was trying to, I guess in an effort to determine rates or fuel consumption, they were looking at different speed engines, different engines with different speeds, high speed and low speed, and trying to determine, again, also based on the LIAC model, what the rates could be based on which kind of engines would be used. Do you recall that email?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Deb.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, we actually have a binder of all the emails that Wallon participated in, and if you could direct us to the email that you're talking about, I'm sure Mr. Fong could take a look, and if there's a particular question or something you want him to explain, he could do that.
I think he recalls the email. It's a very short email, and it was basically Robert Young. I think they contacted MAN Singapore and got the specs for MAN Diesel, and they were getting the specs for high-speed engines and medium-speed engines, and we're trying to develop fuel efficiency, I think, based on those medium and high-speed engines. It's where they're we could see, I think, all that exchange of correspondence was really to try to make assumptions on what could be the fuel rate. I think that research was by economist.com to try to determine fuel rates and fuel efficiency for their preliminary report, which they provided to CUC, which you probably were aware and were able to review, correct? You reviewed the, what do you call this, the preliminary report by economist.com?
No, I haven't seen the preliminary report, but our discussion basically was what the fuel efficiency would be if we got new modern engines, and that discussion took place. But economist.com, if they did send a report to CUC, I haven't seen it.
Thank you. Representative Sdllc.
Mr. Chairman, just for clarification, we go back to Ms. Fisher's comment, and I think her request is only that if we are going to direct our witness to a particular communication that we identify it so that he can easily refer to it. I think that's all she is asking, and maybe we can give her dates or get Mr. dates or something as a reference to that. Is that what we're asking for, Ms. Fisher?
Yes, Representative, because Mr. Fong's communications tend to be very technical, and he's talking about engine speeds, and he's talking about performance of engines, and so it's a little bit sort of comprehensive.
Okay.
So if there's something, yes, that you want, it might be easy to have him look at it.
Yeah, I thought I
but if not, that's fine. If you want if you've asked general questions, and I think he's responded to you.
Thank you. Actually, Mr. Fong has already answered the question. I have the email, but he's pretty much confirmed which one I was referring to, and seems to recall the what was discussed. It was the July 31st email between Mr. Robert Young and Alan, Chuck, and Wallon. And Mr. Wallon understands what was discussed in that. I'm not going to go into detail about that email, so it's okay.
Thank you for your clarification, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay. And I was hoping that you did review the economist.com report. And also further, I was really hoping that you were involved in the review of the power purchase agreement, simply because a lot of the issues in the power purchase agreement do require someone with the technical expertise to be able to determine whether the contract, one, was fair, two, that the rates would be reasonable or at least cost neutral, as the proponents of the contract have stated. And a lot of the questions that need to be asked are these type of questions, the technical questions. Obviously, you cannot determine fuel rates if you don't know things like what kind of engines would be used, what their fuel efficiency is, and so that's why I was trying to ask general questions first regarding Mr. Fong's level of participation in the review of the contract. I had already prepared questions, Mr. Fong, about the contract, but since you did not review it, perhaps what we can do is, can I just, do you, Council, does he have access to the copy of the contract, the power purchase agreement?
Chairman, we do have a copy of the power purchase agreement, but I would have an issue with asking him to make conclusions about anything as far as the contract terms, their legal significance, or anything like that on the spot like this. I would ask that he have a chance to look at whatever he's being directed to, so that he has an opportunity to think about an answer. As you know, this was looked at by many people over many days, and so to put him on the spot, I would hope that the committee just wants to give him an opportunity if you want certain specific answers like that. I think that Mr. Fong could give you some answers probably about general numbers on fuel and engine performance. But as far as analyzing sections of a PPA that he hasn't looked at, in which, frankly, there are lawyers in Washington, D.C. who specialize at these contracts, who've done it for 20 years, and while he's an excellent engineer and he's been amazing with our engines as an engineer and as a problem solver, his experience and proficiency is not in interpreting contracts such as this.
Thank you, Council.
Chair, point of clarification.
May I address with the Council first regarding that? Let me just clarify, Deb, Ms. Fisher. We will be asking questions of Mr. Fong. Now, if he cannot answer it, he can simply say, I can't answer it. If we're probably not going to ask him to determine or to make computations or calculations on the spot. Obviously, he would need time to do that, but maybe general questions that he can maybe answer to, if he can, or we may just ask questions whether are the provisions reasonable, something like that. But at least let's give the questions a chance to be asked, and he will be given the opportunity to answer if he can. If he can't, we understand. Representative De La Cruz.
Ms. Fisher, you just stated a minute ago that there are power plant engineers in Washington, D.C. that can talk more about these power plants. And the other question is, since you stated that, were these individuals from Washington, D.C. ever brought into the picture with regards to this power purchase agreement? You being as a former CUC in-house legal counsel?
Representative, first of all, let me correct what I think is a misunderstanding. I did not say that engineers in Washington looked at this PPA.
I didn't say that. You said that there are engineers in Washington, D.C. that can look at these power plant issues. And I'm just asking whether these individuals that you speak of had taken a look at this PPA.
Okay, again, I did not say engineers in Washington. I said lawyers. There are lawyers, and I was giving this as an example. There are lawyers in Portland, Oregon, in Seattle, in Washington, D.C.
And were these lawyers availed off during the negotiations of this PPA? Do you know?
What I can tell you is that CUC had engaged legal counsel to help with some of our renewable projects, not the PPA particularly.
Ms. Fisher, we're not talking about renewable energy here. We're talking about this PPA.
Correct, and so therefore...
And we're asking the question to Mr. Wallon Young, because I think he is the best individual here to answer those questions.
representative?
How Mr. Wallon Young was not, asked of his opinions, being the person, the real person at CUC that can really look at these contracts. It's not Mr. Fletcher. Mr. Fletcher has no education in power plant engineering. It's Mr. Young. So let him answer the questions, please.
I think we've clarified this, Deb. So let us move on.
Okay.
Thank you. First, let me ask Mr. Fong rather, if he's aware of some comments made by Mr. Tiberius Mocano. He had raised points of significant concern regarding the contract. Are you aware of this document? And it is in our, in our package, Ms. Fisher. It's an email from Tiberius Mocano dated July 27 at 1:40 p.m. from him, Mr. Mocano, to Mr. Fletcher. And I don't see Mr. Fong being CC copied. So, Mr. Fong, were you aware of this correspondence? Can you push the button, please?
I'm sorry. I'm trying to locate it, but it's not in this binder that was given to me. Legal counsel is trying to locate that email.
Okay, well, while she's trying to locate it, let me just kind of summarize some of the points he had made. One point, his first point of significant concern was regarding capacity. And in the contract, on page 17, Council, 5.3, Article 5.3, relative to operations. I'll just read it out. It says, the plant shall be operated as a base load generating unit for the contracted capacity, except during periods of downtime and forced outages, as more specifically described in the specifications and operating memorandum. Subject to this agreement and safe operating practices pursuant to the operating parameters and good operating procedures. Sdllc understands that the plant will not be the sole source of power in the CNMI, and CUC may obtain power from other sources beyond the contracted capacity. Nothing in this article shall require CUC to purchase any power produced by the plant beyond the contracted capacity. So before I ask you about, my question is going to be about this contracted capacity.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry.
I can take you to
my book at the contract, which I think was initialed by Mr. Kurtz, I believe. And I'm seeing...
Ma'am, go to Article 5. It's on page, should be on page 17.
That's operation?
Yes. So 5.3 is operations. That is the paragraph, or rather the provision of the contract I had just read.
5.3A, Chair?
5.3A.
Okay, I think I was looking at a draft. I'm sorry. I just want to give it to Mr. Fong so he can just see what
Fine.
it says.
Fine.
And so that your response will be of a higher quality. Okay?
Thank you. Now, Mr. Young, the reason I referred you to this provision of the contract is it affects several important matters which I will be asking questions on. And maybe the first question would be relative to the ability for CUC to be able to integrate renewable energy power from in the future. So if you look at this, I think there is reference to an understanding that Sdllc understands that they will not be the sole source provider of power, meaning, and they also go to say that CUC may obtain power from other sources beyond the contracted capacity. So it's clear that there is an allowance for the integration of renewable energy in the future, I guess, since we don't have one now. Is that is how I'm reading it? Do you interpret it the same as how I'm reading it?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Point of clarification on that issue, Mr. Jack?
I'm gonna lead on to the next one and then and see if it doesn't clarify your point, then you may ask. But so it basically states that they will be providing base load, point number one, for the contracted capacity. But then they also acknowledge that they won't be the sole source provider of power, and that CUC may obtain power from other sources. I think you and I have agreed to that. But it's important to understand what contracted capacity means and what is the contracted capacity. So to go understand in terms of the contract, there is a definition of contracted capacity. It's on page 3, Council, under definition. And can I just read it for the record? It says, contracted capacity means about 50 megawatt of total net generating capacity on a continuous and reliable basis, measured at the delivery point, with the actual contracted capacity to be based on the anticipated dispatch instructions provided in the specification. So here's where you can help us, if you can. There seems to be two types of capacities here. One is a net generating capacity, which is, it says it's 50 megawatts, and a actual contracted capacity. Just in your reading of this, do you understand the difference between the two, Mr. Fong? Can you push the button, please?
Yes. Well, contracted capacity means 50 megawatts total net generating capacity on a continuous basis. But I'd like to bring your attention to the 5.3a, the first line. It says the plant shall be operated as a base load generating unit. That means the plant must have a load of 50 megawatts continuously, and the remaining load will be picked up by a second or third plant, whether it be a peaking plant or but the important thing to understand is the load must be at least 50 megawatts, otherwise this thing will not work, because it says the plant shall be operated as a base load generating unit. If it was worded differently, if it said the engines will be operated as base load units, then that would be better. But in this case, it says the plant. That means we must have a load of at least 50 megawatts to comply with this.
Meaning the plant has to be able to provide 50 megawatts. Is that?
That is one, and then the load or the demand must be more than 50 megawatts to be able to run this plant at base load. Base load is an industry term, which means running the engines continuously at fixed load, generally 100%. And any additional load will be picked up by a second or third plant.
Thank you. So it must be able to provide 50 megs of continuous power. Is that what you're saying?
That is correct, except for the time during maintenance.
Thank you. May I just clarify something further? Mr. Fong, does that also mean that we have to purchase 50 megawatts? And I think there is clarification here in that it refers to, under definition again, it says measured at the delivery point, and the delivery point is their plant or our, what is delivery point? Measured at the delivery point.
Delivery point is where the connection is metered, where the energy is metered, so that they can build CUC.
Okay, so where CUC receives their energy, we have a meter there, and so it's measured from that point.
That's correct.
Thank you. And again, it goes on to say, with the actual contracted capacity to be based on the anticipated dispatch instructions provided in the specification. Now, about 5 lines down on the same, or maybe 3 lines down, 3 or 4, under page 3 definitions, there is a definition for dispatch instructions. And dispatch instructions in the definition means the rate of net electrical output specified from time to time in writing by CUC to Sdllc in accordance with these specifications and this agreement. What does that mean, Mr. Fong?
Normally, a control center would advise a generating source how much power it needs on a daily basis, and this what we call economic dispatch. But CUC would have to inform Sdllc or the new plant how much load it must generate on a daily basis. Of course, there would be communication between the two parties, because sometimes a unit may be down in the new plant, whereby a 50 megawatt load cannot be supplied by the plant. So CUC will have to take that into account and advise the new plant what the output should be of their plant.
Thank you, thank you. So let me just see if I understand this correctly. Based on our discussion so far, this power plant must be able to provide 50 megawatts of continuous and uninterrupted power, must be capable of providing 50 megawatts. Now, how much we purchase from them or they deliver to us would be based on the anticipated dispatch instructions coming from CUC to the power plant, telling them this is how much load we need, and then the power would be, I guess, distributed or provided accordingly. Is that?
That is correct, but the way this thing is worded is CUC cannot tell the new plant operators, for example, to lower their load to 80%, because it's a base load plant. they run 100% load continuously. So, you know, in economic dispatch, the system controllers normally tell the plant, look, you run your engines at 80% or 90%. In this case, it would not be possible because it's a base load plant.
So does that mean that we have to buy the 50 megawatts whether we need it or not?
Well, the thing is, could you repeat the question, the last question?
Thank you. You just clarified that even though the anticipated dispatch instructions from CUC to the power plant says, well, based on, you know, the current demand, you may run it at 80%. You said the power plant is required to run at 50 megawatts. So therefore my question is, even though we need 80%, are we required to buy 100% of the 50 megawatts?
Well, if I can answer it this way. Firstly, the demand or the load has to be 50 megawatts or more for us to be able to do this. Like currently the load is 30 megawatts. So if the load is 30 megawatts, it's not possible for them to supply 50 megawatts. The load has to be, or the demand has to be 50 megawatts at a minimum.
I used to hear the term, the CUC term, minimum purchase requirements, and I think those legal terms are embedded in other power purchase agreements, such as, let's take Telesource for example. There is this minimum threshold that we must pay for, and whether we need it or not. In this case, that is our minimum.
Okay,
is that fair to say?
That is correct. But when we say when a minimum take, it's energy. It's energy, kilowatt hours. For example, 10 million kilowatt hours. But 50 megawatts is not energy, it's power.
Power and energy are not the same thing?
No. Okay, power is kilowatts. Energy is power used over certain hours. Kilowatt hours versus kilowatt. So power is just basically kilowatt. Energy is when power is used over a period of time, then it becomes kilowatt hour. So if you say there's a minimum take or pay in kilowatt hours, that makes a lot of sense. And that's how take or pay contracts are written.
Thank you. I think that's the term that I was trying to grasp, is this take or pay. Is there a take or pay requirement in this based on what you've read? A simple question.
If I may, we haven't reviewed the PPA, so... Just ma'am, based on what we have read so far, and we've only read 5.3, just based on your understanding of section 5.3, which talks about base load, which you've discussed, which talks about contracted capacity, and now you're kind of clarifying the issue of take and pay. Do you see it anywhere in this provision?
Okay, can I just answer it this way? The capital cost, or the 190 million, is a fixed cost. That one we pay irrespective of if the plant generates or not. It's a fixed cost. That's the cost of capital, or the capital cost. However, in the PPA, there is a production plus an operation and maintenance cost. The total is 4.4 cents a kilowatt hour. So whatever kilowatt hours or energy they produce and sell to CUC, that is the rate, 3.4 cents a kilowatt hour. The total, the combination of production cost plus the operation and maintenance cost.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. So in addition to the guaranteed price that we pay, that $600 and something dollars, which is the capital cost, we would pay the 3.5 cents per kilowatt hour of whatever we use. Is that
Of energy sold to CUC.
right? Now, I hope you understand what I was trying to get at. I guess what I was trying to get at is what will be sold to CUC. Is that based on what our demands are, or based on what they're producing, the energy that they're producing? Do we have to buy 50 megawatts of power, whether we need it or not, is the question.
I read the PPA, but I didn't study it well enough to confirm or to give you a complete answer. But the term base load, it's a industry term. Base load means base load, 100% load continuously. So if they run that plant 100% at 100% load continuously, then the production will be what CUC has to pay, unless the agreement says otherwise. But I only read the agreement, I didn't study it fully.
Thank you. Will you then, can I ask you then, maybe after this hearing, to take a look at this contract to answer that question? Not now, I can understand you can't do that now, but to take a look at the contract and to form your own professional opinion, because you know the problem we're having right now is to determine those kinds of, to answer those questions. Nobody seems to have the answer. Lawyers cannot answer it. Unfortunately, Mr. Fletcher's background and education and experience is not in a position to answer. So that's why we're asking you. You are our professional. You are, and if you haven't had a chance to look at it, you know, we understand. You were not given the opportunity to look at it. Plus, you were on vacation. So maybe we're asking you should look at it and maybe try to answer some of the questions that we're posing now. So, Council, I ask if you can please take note of the questions that we're answering. If Mr. Fong cannot answer it at this time, maybe he can take a look at it later and maybe provide the committee with the answer after he has had ample time to review. One more before I go on to...
Mr. Chairman, can I just make
Certainly.
a comment? I just want to say that engineering language is quite different from contract and legal language. And sometimes, actually a lot of times, they don't agree. So just wanted to make that point.
Thank you for that clarification. And we also would like to understand what the difference is so we can understand the issues. But relative to the question, if I may ask it again, is CUC required to purchase the full contracted capacity of 50 megawatts as per the contract? Now, Ms. Fisher, lawyers may want to look at that question as well and maybe help Mr. Young to in the answer. And the other issue relevant to contracted capacity is this dispatch instructions. Now, both the contracted capacity refers to the anticipated dispatch instructions provided in the specifications, and the dispatch instructions also should be in accordance with the specifications. Now, if you go, I went to look where in the contract this specification is at, and I found that it is in the Give me a minute here. The drawings and technical technical design, I believe, and I think it's on page.
Chair, if I may, you may be thinking of section 3.2, which talks about the
Thank you.
preparation of detailed
I thought it
designs.
was in the back of the
Yes, sir.
contract. There you go. The drawings and the technical details. I finally found it. It's on page 13 under Article 3.4, drawings and technical details. Now let me read. It says, without prejudice to Article 3.3, SDLC shall within 180 days of the contract signing date prepare and submit to CUC 5 hard copies regarding the main group of drawings and technical details listed hereunder with respect to the plan. And you have A, which talks about the general layout of machinery and equipment. B, the general and the detailed drawings and specification for the electromechanical work. And it goes down, and then finally I see specifications, all specifications under H. So I was trying to see is, contracted capacity is based on the anticipated dispatch, which is based on the specification, but none of that is available, at least the specification part, until sometime after the signing of the contract, up to 6 months. And I was just wondering, are we able to make any assumptions here or answer any of the questions that I have just raised before the specifications are developed?
I think it depends on the type of questions.
Then perhaps you can enlighten the members what kind of questions can be answered and what kind can't be answered. If you have to wait until after the contract is signed and wait up to 6 months before being provided with the specs.
Mr. Chairman, I think what 3.4 basically says is drawing and technical details. It also includes equipment specifications. All that would be provided sometime after the contract is signed. As of now, we haven't seen any specification. For example, if you take engine specification, it gives bore size, power per cylinder, BMEP or the basic mean effective pressure, the mean effective pressure. That kind of information will only be available at a later stage, and we don't have that kind of information now.
Thank you for clarifying that. I guess the question is, are we able at this point to make determinations on, let's say for example, rates or fuel consumption or fuel efficiency without those details now?
I would say yes, to some degree. We could.
So we don't need to have these details now. It's okay, it's fine to sign the contract now. We know we can get the answers to things like rates and so forth, and be able to confirm the rates that is being proposed now. The rates that are being proposed now is 18 cents per kilowatt hour. Can we do that? Can we make assumptions and compute based on our existing knowledge of different types of engines without the specs being provided?
Mr. Chairman, regarding the 18 cents, if we can produce and sell power for 18 cents using diesel generators, I'm sorry, I have to disappoint a lot of people. It's not possible. There's no engine on the earth that can generate electricity using diesel at 18 cents a kilowatt hour. It's not possible.
Why is it not possible, Mr. Fong?
Okay, if I can just break it down this way. There's two components in the rates. Two components. One is we call it the base rate or the fixed cost, and the average the base rate is about 7 cents. The rest is the fuel component of the rates, which is or the LIAC. Now, if the average base rate is 7 cents and the cost of the project or the capital cost it works out to about 3 cents a kilowatt hour based on current production. So if you take 7 cents in the base rate plus the 3 cents, is 10 cents. So there's 8 cents left for the LIAC. Currently LIAC is about 30 cents a kilowatt hour.
How much?
Approximately 30 cents per kilowatt hour, the LIAC. But now we have to reduce the LIAC down from 30 cents to 8 cents. That means we have to basically triple the efficiency of the diesel engine.
Can a brand new, top of the line, rated #1 in the world diesel engine produce or have triple the efficiency level as any standard engine? Is there something out there?
The net efficiency or the efficiency of diesel engines today is 46%. For many years, engineers had been trying to topple the 40% barrier, but now it's up to 46. To triple the fuel efficiency of the diesel engine, they will take it over 100%. It's not possible.
Thank you for that clarification. Thank you. And so, let's say the best diesel engine, using the current LIAC model that we have now, what can we expect to pay using the best diesel engines around right now per kilowatt hour?
Okay, if I can put it this way, when I came back from vacation and this thing was signed, because I'm in charge of power, I had to satisfy myself, or I had to run some numbers for myself to see what this thing gonna pan out, or how it's gonna look like. So I looked at 3 of the best engines in the world today from 3 different manufacturers. The manufacturers are Wärtsilä, MAN, and Caterpillar, MAK. And I ran they have published fuel efficiencies out there, and I have the manuals for all 3 companies, the brochures. The best fuel efficiency we'll get is about 16.4, 16.5 kilowatt hours per gallon. That's about a little over 10% of what we're getting from the existing plant. So I think it's not difficult to work out. If the new plant is 10% more efficient, say if it's 10% more efficient, and the LIAC is 30 cents a kilowatt, and the LIAC represents primarily fuel cost. So if the new plant is 10% more efficient, so the savings will be 10% of the 30 cents, which is 3 cents a kilowatt hour. That will be the reduction in the cost of fuel. However, there is a cost of capital, which is based on current production is another 3 cents a kilowatt hour. So it's a wash. It's an offset.
So what savings may be acquired from the engine's fuel efficiency is offset by what we may have to pay for capital costs, roughly.
That is my that is what I calculated in the last week.
Thank you. So our current rate right now is what? Something like 39 cents or 40 cents or something? With our existing plant.
With our existing plant is about, I estimate, 36 or 37 cents. It depends on the customer class. The commercial customers pay a higher rate, but the average would be, say, about 37 cents or so.